So, we talked earlier about carbohydrates, how carbohydrates are the same thing as monosaccharides that are strung together to make polysaccharides. A monosaccharide would be like glucose, the sugar in your blood. A polysaccharide would be like starch, the sugar in a potato. Now we're going to move to talking about lipids. Now, lipids, the individual monomer is called a fatty acid, which is basically a long string that makes a fat. Lipids are the polymer. So you put the fatty acids together, you end up with the polymer of a lipid. And a lipid would be something like oil or wax. Generally, it's a little bit slippery. Motor oil is one kind of lipid. The oil that's vegetable oil is another kind of lipid. The fat in our meat is another kind of lipid, and so on. But they're all lipids. Now, the thing about a lipid is that a lipid is going to be used primarily to store energy in living things, like I talked about a little bit earlier in the previous video. Storing energy, your body has excess calories. It says, aha, we better save these for later. And so when your body saves them for later, what it does is it stores that energy as fat. Also, sometimes the lipids are used in like a waterproofing of the fur on some mammals like seals or birds like penguins. Also, it's used as the membrane of a cell, something that we're going to talk about a lot more when we start talking about cells. Basically speaking, the structure of it is a long chain. You've got a fatty acid that is a long chain, and you've got a glycerol, which is kind of like a bar on the end of it connected to 3 fatty acids. And we'll see that a little bit more when we look at the structure of it. One thing that you hear sometimes is you hear about saturated and unsaturated fats. Now, basically, this is the question of whether or not there is an extra chemical bond in there holding together that particular fatty acid. And the idea is that an unsaturated one is a fatty acid or a lipid that has at least one carbon double bond in it, which means instead of just one bond holding 2 carbon atoms together, it's 2 bonds holding those 2 carbon atoms together. Saturated fat, the bad fat, is fat that has no double bonds at all. It's all just hydrogens on either side. And the whole idea is that when you got a double bond, that's a little bit harder to break down. Your body's got to pour more energy into breaking apart that bond. So it basically causes less of an excess of energy. But when it's saturated, has only single bonds, those are easier to break, so your body can break down that fat and use the energy within it for its processes. And this is what we're talking about here. Down on the end, this is the glycerol. This is the thing that the fatty acid is attached to. And usually there, are 3 fatty acids attached to one glycerol. Sorry about that. The glycerol molecule. Now, if you'll notice here we have with the saturated fat, you've got this long string of carbons. And the thing is that string of carbons can be up to hundreds of carbons. It's not just the few that you see here on the demonstration. So unlike sugar that is 5 or 6 carbons in a row, here we've got tens of carbons, hundreds of carbons, all strung together with hydrogens on either end, and then connected to another carbon. And then finally, on the end of it, you got a last hydrogen sort of tacked on the end. Now, the other thing that you can see, if I move my little spot here, is you can see that when there is a unsaturated one, it means that there's a double bond between 2 of the carbons somewhere. This bends that long, straight tail of the fatty acid. It's harder for the body to break this down, and the resulting change in shape means that this is less likely to have the calories from it absorbed as efficiently by your body, so it doesn't result in you retaining as much of the energy or retaining as much of it as more fat. That's the reason they call saturated fats unhealthy and unsaturated fats healthy. Basically, because unsaturated fats provide a little bit less energy. And that's fatty acids and glycerol making lipids.